For a long time, the NFL was thought of as serious business, played by serious people, taking things way too seriously.
We lost the game because of illegal procedure! Get your down!
Between a rigorous uniform code and fines for excessive celebration, it's no wonder some people used to call the NFL the No Fun League.
I think they're going to get Harris for taunting.
No, they can't do that.
Are you kidding me?
They started calling it the No Fun League, and that's why. I mean, he just adds a little something to the game. There's nothing wrong with that.
Football's a game. It's supposed to be fun.
And a little dance from Chad Johnson, a little jig.
Players should bring their personalities to the field.
Let's go!
But you know what really made the NFL more fun for fans? Fantasy football.
Next up in the draft is third and long. You have 5 minutes.
Dickerson. Wait a second. Okay, I'll try Dorsett then.
He's retired!
What started as a meeting of meatheads in your mother's basement has blossomed into a worldwide obsession played by more than 30 million people.
Hey, Weez! I got you on my fantasy team!
Including many of the players themselves.
Yeah, I'm killing in fantasy tonight. That's my fantasy running back.
So happy I activated your on my fantasy team. Let's go, baby. Give me 6 points.
I caught up with a fantasy expert, best known as the talented Mr. Roto. So tell us how fantasy football got started here in this hotel.
November 3rd, 1962, a guy named Wilfred Winkenbach, who worked for the Oakland Raiders. So they were in town, miserable season, they're 0-7.
Right.
And he's hanging out at this hotel with Bill Tunnell, who did PR for the Raiders, and Scott Sterling, who covered the team.
This
for
is
the
all
Oakland
pre-Al
Tribune.
Davis.
Pre-Al Davis.
Raiders.
Yeah, exactly,
Right.
correct. So he sort of had this epiphany. It was just like, I wish there was a way that we could draft real players with their stats and we become the owners and sort of control it, because it was something to pay attention to other than how bad the Raiders were that year.
So are you about to tell me that the Raiders had a role in starting fantasy football, and now the Raiders trade away all their best fantasy players?
Pretty much, yes.
It seems ironic.
Full circle.
I think they're going to like Amari Cooper.
Can we revisit they gave up too much for that number one?
So they came up with the rules
Here
sort
at this
of
hotel.
here at this hotel. The Hotel Manhattan at the time is now
The Row.
Now
Yeah.
the Row. And then in August of 1963, Peyton, they had their first draft. 2 quarterbacks, 4 halfbacks, 6 pass catchers, wide receivers or tight ends. They had 2 defensive backs and a special teams. It was touchdown only. Here's a copy of the very first.
This is the first draft?
This is the first draft ever, and so they didn't really go in order. They just sort of.
I'm gonna name drop here. Tarkington. Flores, that's Tom Flores.
Yeah.
Kemp, Congressman.
Yep.
Kemp. Tittle.
Yep.
Y.A.
Yep. Pretty good guy.
Ditka. You gotta take him high.
Jokic pegs a strike to Iron Mike for a touchdown.
Number 1 pick, George Blanda.
George Blanda, number 1. So, and Jim Brown, you said was second?
Yeah.
How do you pick Jim Brown second?
Seems weird. In a league where it was touchdown-only scoring, seems like Jim Brown would go over George Blanda, as great as Blanda was.
Yeah.
Because they didn't count kicking in this league.
Gifford, is that Frank or Kathy Lee?
I believe it is Frank.
Frank was a high pick?
Yeah, Kathy Lee gets drafted in different leagues.
So the original scoring system was just touchdowns?
Touchdown only.
So there was no difference between O.J. Simpson, ran for tons of yards and touchdowns, and Pete Banaszak, the guy who was just a goal line plunge guy.
Yeah, no, I'm impressed you've done your research, because that's exactly right. So
I do. I don't have a job, so I have lots of time.
There was a guy named Andy Musolimas who was in the original league. And he had a bar called King's X, which is in Oakland, California. And Musolimas took the game to his patrons at King's X.
King's X.
Made it public. They kicked him out of the original league for doing that.
Because he was a rat. He was a rat.
Exactly.
He talked.
Exactly. You can't talk, right?
And so that's how the word
started to spread.
Thanks to Andy Musolimas and the growth of the personal computer, fantasy football took off.
Oh, I think they're great. I mean, it gives a fan an opportunity to really get involved with the statistical end of the game.
Come on, Herschel, big day, baby! You're on my fantasy football team!
It's great to have a fantasy, I think. If you didn't have a fantasy, you couldn't live, they tell me. So I think it's great to play a little bit of fantasy football.
It's great if you're having a great year because someone's in love with you. If you're not having a good year, they're pissed off that they drafted you.
I'm going to take Peyton Manning.
Wow.
I got to tell you, the whole time I was playing, fantasy football was kind of an irritant for me because people would come up to me, they're going, hey, what the heck happened last night? I was like, we won 10-7, last-minute field goal, great win. They're like, yeah, you didn't score any touchdowns. And I was like, you know, my goals and your goals are a little different. Buddy.
Come on, my fantasy team needs you. Come on, Roddy. That's a beautiful catch. I need 3 more.
I will apologize on behalf of those fantasy owners that come up to you because
that wasn't the intent.
That's not the intent. But I also love the guy that like meets you, gets 10 seconds of your time, and what he wants to do is complain about his fantasy team, right?
Right. You got me? Hey, all right, I'll try to do my best for you, okay?
What would you say were some of the greatest fantasy seasons of all time? Don't take my 55 touchdowns in 2013, even though I should have had 65. He took me out of the fourth quarter a lot that year. Is it Moss in 07?
For Randy Moss, touchdown reception number 23, an NFL record.
Is it OJ in 73?
And now it's for the 2000. OJ running left. OJ, 5 more. There it is. He did it. He did it.
Both guys had great fantasy seasons. But #1 fantasy season of all time, LaDainian Tomlinson, 2006.
Handoff. Tomlinson skirts it outside into the end zone. Charger fans are witnesses to history.
463 fantasy points, scored tons of touchdowns. Your season, the 55 touchdowns, I know you don't want to bring it up, but if I can just for a minute.
Since you brought it up.
At the time, it was the greatest season in fantasy history by a quarterback.
Peyton throws home run. He's got Julius Thomas there. Thomas with a touchdown, and there's the record. All right, congratulations. Great job. Great job. A record-setting performance by Peyton Manning, his 51st touchdown pass.
When you retired, you had the most fantasy points of any quarterback.
Can I add that to my resume?
Please do. I think it should be the first thing that gets introduced. Yeah.
At least 30 seconds of a standing ovation for Peyton Manning.
You still have the greatest fantasy individual single game. Do you remember the game? Can you guess what it was?
Baltimore,
opening season 2013.
Caught by Demaryius Thomas. He's off to the races. DT at midfield, and he is long gone. That will be Peyton Manning's 7th touchdown pass, and this is against the Ravens.
To date, you still have the 2nd best season by a fantasy quarterback in history. Mahomes this year beat you by 4 points.
I mean, throwing these no-look passes, I mean, he's showing off.
Look at the magic of the quarterback. Throws it like almost a no-look.
You know what's crazy, Peyton, is that 2011, the year that you missed with the injury, right?
Right. Fantasy owners hated me then, right?
Whatever, we all make mistakes.
Right.
That's all right, we move on.
Yeah. You learn from them.
No human's perfect.
Correct.
2011, actually, Eli's best fantasy year.
He's going to throw it left for Mitch. Touchdown, Giants! And that's your ball game.
There was still a Manning
in the family.
In the family. Yeah, in the top 5 of fantasy quarterbacks. I do have to ask you, though, about the Kansas City game in 2015.
Omaha!
You had minus 6.6 fantasy points. The only game that's been worse fantasy-wise since that game was Nathan Peterman's game.
Oh, my God.
Gets plenty of time, throws it down the middle of the field. It's going to be intercepted. 9 possessions, 5 3-and-outs, and 4 interceptions.
Just as you're bringing up 2013, and I was remembering how good I was, you bring that up, and that brings me right down.
You're the greatest of all time.
No, I like being humble, so you've done it, and this interview was going great.